Hi peeps, happy Monday. Um, Welcome to our first day of our book study. Now, it's going to look a little different. I'm still trying to get used to all of this, but I'm hoping that you found my YouTube channel okay, and no, I am not becoming a famous YouTuber. I am just going to be putting lessons on here with our book. But before we get into it, I kind of want to explain what this is going to look like because obviously we are not in school, unfortunately, and we can't do this together. But I want to go through your orange booklet. Now, hopefully this is in your purple bag. But if for some reason you don't have it, then try to look for a piece of blank paper, a pencil, whatever you can. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. But if you do have this, I'm so happy. Thank you for holding on to it. Now, there are quite a few pages in here. Unfortunately, we won't get to all of them because some of it is kind of hard to explain without me being there with you. So we're only going to pick a few pages to work on, and I'll tell you what pages we're working on before my video's over. So you'll always know what you should be open to while we're working on it together. So always make sure you have this with you, next to you. And then the other things that you should have gotten, it was actually stuffed in the inside of your booklet, but yours I think is hot pink. It's a character trait sheet because we're giving the main character, Anton, a character trait throughout the book. And then you also should have gotten, I'm not sure what color Miss Mandy made them, but I typed up a theme sheet for you. And these are the themes that we saw right before we left, actually, with children's books. So hopefully you have that with you as well. So bottom line, always make sure you have this next to you. And if you don't, then try to find a blank piece of paper with a pencil with that, okay? So before I dive into our book, this is a World War II book. I'm super excited about it. Every time I read, I will ask you a question to answer. So whenever this video is done, you'll have to go to Google Classroom and to answer the question for the day so I know that you read or listened to me read, okay? So it'll show me if you read or not or listened to me read. So I feel like there's one more thing I had to say. Oh, some days are going to look different. Like today, since I'm introducing this whole project, the video is going to be a little longer. So I'm only going to read chapter 1. Tomorrow I'm reading chapter 2 and 3 because they're a little shorter. So each day is going to look a little different. And I'm only going to be reading Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. So Wednesdays will be Root Word Wednesday packets and a fun book to read for 20 minutes. And then Fridays, I just don't really want to do too much on Friday. But you will have still have something to work on Friday. So make sure you're checking Google Classroom to see what you have to do. So without further ado, here we go. We're only, remember, going to read chapter 1 today. I'm hoping you all like it. And here we go. So the title of our book is called The Enemy Above. And it's a novel of World War II, and it's by Michael P. Spradlin. This is our cover. Here's our main character on the bottom. That's Anton. And you see soldiers on the top, which are German soldiers. Okay. I'm going to read the back to you just to give you a little foreshadow, a little preview of what we're going to be reading. So it says, Nazi gunfire could only mean one thing. The Germans are closing in, and 12-year-old Anton knows his family can't outrun them. A web of underground caves seems like the perfect place to hide, but danger lurks above the surface. Ruthless Major Karl von Dusen of the Gestapo has made it his mission to round up every Jew in the Ukrainian countryside. Anton knows that if his community is discovered, they'll be sent to work camps, or worse. When a surprise invasion catches him off guard, Anton makes a radical decision. He won't run any longer, and he won't hide. He will stop being the hunted and start doing some hunting of his own. Dun, dun, dun. I love how that really captures you in right away. We know that our main character is Anton, and he's actually 12 years old, so he's only a year older than all of you, or most of you. So I think that's really cool that this book can be relatable to his point of view, to his perspective, because he's really close to your age. So here we go. We're going to read chapter 1. With your booklet today, your assignment for me is going to be thinking of a chapter title. Now, if you open up your booklet to the front page, you'll see that you have a line for your book title. If you want to put the book title in there, you can. Again, it's called Enemy Above. And then if you want to write your name down, you can, but you know it's yours. And then if you open up to the next page, you'll see a big chart. And this is where you're going to write your chapter titles. This kind of should remind you of, why am I blanking on our book that we just read? It's the book we just read in school, and my Miss Johnson's brain is not working. But this is the same idea of chapter titles with that book as well. And we're going to write a chapter title for chapter 1. So when I'm done with this video, you're going to go to Google Classroom and tell me what you wrote. And you're also going to tell me why you named it that chapter, okay? So think about that while I'm reading, and jot it down once you have an idea. I'm going to get my reading glasses on. Some of you didn't know I had reading glasses. If you come to my morning meetings in the morning, you see that I put them on sometimes. So if you want to join us, you can. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. At first, Anton thought the rumble was a summer storm. They often blew in from the west this time of year. The rain would sweep across the wheat fields, the far-off thunder sounding like an apple rolling across the wooden floor of his family's small farmhouse. Yet when he looked up from the book he was reading and glanced through the window at the sky, no looming storm clouds marred the pink haze of twilight. The rumble was something else. In the distance, he saw flashes of light on the horizon. It wasn't lightning, nor fire. It was an explosion of artillery, which artillery is another word for weapons used during war. He stood and padded to the bedroom window as the noise grew louder. Shell after shell detonated, and the night sky became a solid bank of light. Something truly horrible must be happening. Anton watched the blasts for a moment longer. Battles always made him think of his father. Was he even still alive? It was 1942, and Papa had left their village in Ukraine to join the Polish army 3 years earlier, right before Hitler had begun his blitzkrieg across Eastern Europe. Poland, with its cavalry still riding horses, was little match for tanks and cannons. But Anton's father had joined the fight anyway. He'd said fighting Hitler was the only way to stop the madman. So his father wanted to stop Hitler from doing what he was doing. "Are you out there, Papa?" Anton whispered. Then he prayed, asking God to please send his father home, and Uncle Pavel as well. Pavel was 19 years old. He was more of a brother to Anton than to Papa. Every night at dinner, he talked of leaving the farm to join up with one of the partisan militias who were fighting the Nazis. But Anton's grandmother had always forbidden it. A partisan is someone who really supports a group. So his uncle wanted to join a group that would stop the Nazis from fighting. "You will not go," Bubby would say. Bubby was the Yiddish word for grandmother. She was old and her back was bent from years of hard work. Bubby used a polished wooden walking stick, and when she spoke, she would grab it from where it leaned against their dinner table and rap it firmly on the floor 2 times to emphasize a point. Thump, thump. Everyone who knew Bubby knew that when she thumped the walking stick, she was serious. It meant pay attention. You were about to get a lecture. Side note, I've heard Bub or Bubby, but for this book, I'm going to say Bubby, so that's his grandmom. "You will not leave your family. I have already given my oldest son. Your brother is a soldier, a prisoner, or a corpse. We have had no word from him since he left us. Your partisans are fools if they think they can stand against the Nazis. They are not trained or disciplined like a real army, and their ranks are riddled with spies. Those resistance fighters are just as likely to get you killed as if you joined the Russian army. I cannot lose you too. Pavel would keep his head down, shoveling potatoes and bread into his mouth. That was all they had to eat anymore. Oftentimes, there wasn't even any bread. Mother, he would say between bites, I will not sit by and watch while Nazi dogs kill and enslave our people. What life do we have here? Every day they creep closer to us. They have been beaten back in Stalingrad, but soon they will be back and they will take everything, everything. We cannot sit by and let them. We must fight. So right now, he's trying to convince Bubby to let him fight. Fight, Bubby would spit the word. You are too young to know anything, Pavel. There is always someone fighting, always someone taking. Our family has lived in the village of Borshiv for centuries, and always there's war, someone hating and killing someone else. The Austrians, the Russians, the Polish, they fight endlessly over Ukraine. I will not lose another son to it. No more. You will not go. Usually, Pavel would get up and storm off to the barn or go to the village square to listen to the gossip. Sometimes he'd get his hands on a newspaper that was passed from household to household and scoured for information about the war. No one knew what to believe. The Germans were winning. The Russians were pushing them back. The English and Americans had landed in France, but the Germans pushed them back into the sea. No, the English and Americans had gained a foothold and were driving the Germans back. Hitler was fighting a war on two fronts and losing both. Still, others said the English and Americans had not even landed in Europe, that they were concentrating on fighting in the South Pacific. No one knew the truth or what to believe. So there's so many stories going on about the Americans, about the English, if they're in Europe or South Pacific, so they really don't know anything at this point. There is only one thing that is certain, Pavel would often say. The Nazis are coming here. Hitler wants our fields and farms to feed his massive army. Whether they are winning or losing or the whole war is a stalemate, it does not matter. They are coming. But no one is coming to save us, Mother. We must save ourselves. Bah! Bubby would say and throw up her gnarled hands. That signaled the end of any discussion. Another of Anton's uncles, Dmitri, remained quiet whenever Pavel and Bubby argued. He was the middle son. Anton sometimes thought things were hardest on Dmitri, caught in between his mother and younger brother. He'd worked harder to keep the family fed and clothed since Anton's father had left. And Anton knew Dmitri worried all the time. That Pavel would leave, that there wouldn't be enough food, that some night the door would be kicked in and their small house invaded by the Gestapo. Now, if you're wondering what the Gestapo is, I looked it up just to be sure I'm giving you the right information. It is the official secret police of the Nazi Germany. So obviously people who you would not want to run into. Anton's Bubby and his uncles had tried to keep the stories from him, but he had heard them nonetheless. The Nazis and their leader, Adolf Hitler, hated Jews. At first, no one had believed the Nazis would be bold enough to do anything about it. But now they'd all heard too many tales of entire Jewish neighborhoods and cities to the west being rounded up and sent away. All over Europe, Jews fled their homes, but many waited, refusing to believe it would happen to them. Then the Nazis would arrive. They blasted their way across the continent to prove the dominance of the Third Reich. And everywhere they went, Jews were rounded up, put on trains, and never seen again. The Third Reich is another word for their empire. They're a group of people that rule that area. Now it seemed the fighting was upon them. The detonations grew louder. So that means the explosions grew louder. Flickering flames lit up the entire horizon. That could only mean one thing. The Nazis were now destroying villages and towns on their way through Ukraine. If the Jews fled before they arrived, the Nazis would burn everything, making sure there would be nothing left for them to return to. A loud explosion drew Anton's attention. It came from the northwest toward the village. The door to his room burst open. His grandmother stood in the doorway holding an oil lamp. The wick was turned down very low, giving off only the barest amount of light. "Bubby," Anton said, "they are getting closer. That explosion was only a few kilometers away." "Yes, Kinder. It is no longer safe here. I hoped this day would never come, but it's here. It's time for all of us to leave. We will meet the others at the crossroads. We must hurry and stay to the shadows. If we become separated, meet Everbada. You know the way. Make sure you are not seen or followed. Trust no one. No one, Kinder. The Nazis are offering rewards and extra rations for those who turn Jews into the Gestapo. Our home is now Judenfrei. We must careful." Judenfrei was the German word meaning free of Jews. Anton had heard the village elders talk of the German army. They swept into towns and villages and either killed all the Jews immediately or sent them off to camps. And we knew that going to camps, it was not like summer camp. We talked about what the Jews experienced at those camps, where once hundreds, if not thousands of Jews might have lived, the Gestapo made sure none remained. The Gestapo was the Nazi secret police, and they were tasked with finding and eliminating the Jews wherever they went. Anton could not imagine it. Bubby thumped her walking stick twice on the floor. "Anton," she said, drawing him out of his morbid thoughts. "We must hurry. Gather up your things. Your uncles are coming. We will leave for the forest." "But, Bubby," Anton said before his words trailed off. "What is it, my Kinder?" No matter how big he got, Anton would always be a child to Bubby. "Nothing," Anton said. He hurried about his small room, gathering up his meager belongings. He had been about to ask after his father. What if Papa came home and found them gone? How would he know where to find them? But Anton had noticed lately that whenever the subject of his father came up, Bubby's eyes would water and her voice became a whisper, so he kept his questions to himself. Someday, when the war was over, his father would come back, or Anton would go find him. "Oh, Papa," he thought, "how I miss you every day." Anton remembered how much his papa had loved to play pranks on his younger brothers. When they were working in the fields, Papa would stuff dirt down Pavel's pants and laugh at his hot-tempered little brother chased after him. When they still had horses, Papa would fiddle with the harnesses when Dmitri was plowing the fields. After a few rows, the harness would become hopelessly tangled. Uncle Dmitri would curse, and Papa's booming laugh would be heard all over the farm. It seemed so long ago. Anton picked up the small photo of his father he kept on the table by his bedside. His mother had died of a fever when he was a baby. All he could remember of his childhood was his father and their life on the farm. Lately, when he was working in the fields or doing chores, he thought of his father, of his rough hands, his deep laugh, his warm smile, but with every passing year, it was becoming more difficult to remember Papa's face. At night, he would stare at the photo, determined to memorize each feature, from his father's rich black hair to the dancing merriment in his eyes, but it seldom worked. Each day, he felt Papa slipping further and further away. The flickering light of the artillery lit up Anton's room as he gathered up his few possessions. Bubby had prepared the family for the day the Nazis might come. He spread his warm woolen blanket out on the floor. On it, he placed a pocket knife, a small hatchet, a tin cup, 2 changes of clothes, a few candles, and some matches. He rolled the blanket lengthwise until it formed a tube with his supplies in the middle. Then he folded it in half and tied the ends with cord. Now, he could easily carry everything over his shoulder. "Hurry, Kinder," Bubby shouted from the other room. "We must go." Anton left his small room off the kitchen and joined his waiting grandmother. She stood by the door in a dark dress with a cloth scarf over her head, holding a cloth bag in one hand and her walking stick in the other. "We will meet your uncles and the rest of our Jewish neighbors at the crossroads." As they left their small home, it did not occur to Anton that he might never see it again. He had heard the elders talk about Borshev's history. It was surrounded by endless fields of wheat and potatoes and had been alternately claimed by Poland, Austria, and Russia in the last 50 years. And now the Germans were coming. They might be the worst of all. The noise from the artillery fire was growing louder, but the Russian army was far to the east. Who were the Nazis fighting? Perhaps members of the partisan militia or the Polish resistance? All the gossip said the Polish army had been crushed by the Germans' first attacks, but perhaps some of the fighters had survived. It seemed unlikely, but if Papa was among them, Anton would try to hold out hope. Bubby, Anton said, the fighting grows closer. They quickened their pace. Anton took the cloth bag Bubby carried so she could walk faster. He could not imagine being captured and sent to the camps. The unsanitary conditions, the forced labor, Bubby would never survive it. They went through the wheat and potato fields surrounding their farmhouse, and after walking several hundred meters, they reached the tree line. Anton felt better. The night was cloudy and moonless, but he had felt exposed crossing the field. The Germans would have many vehicles patrolling the countryside, and the Gestapo was famous for using dogs to track down their victims. Among the trees, they would at least be harder to spot. About an hour later, they had almost reached the crossroads. Anton always thought it was funny to call the dirt paths that ran through their countryside roads. They hardly qualified. In the spring, when the rains came, they turned into a muddy area that oxes and livestock became hopelessly caught in. Yet they were the only way that the locals could travel or take their crops to market. Every farming family knew that the countryside as well. Perhaps that would keep them alive. But they would have to hurry into hiding. Bubby wasn't nimble enough to run for it if the Germans stumbled upon them. Anton was not sure how old she was. She never mentioned her age and had forbidden anyone from speaking of it. I have been around a long time, she would say, but I am wiser and smarter than all of you. His grandmother had worked hard all her life. Now her body was bent and she moved slowly, partly because her bones ached and partly because of the darkness. They finally reached the crossing and found a shadowed spot to wait for Anton's uncles. Anton helped Bubby squat low in the wheat where they could be ready to hide should a German patrol pass by. Bubby, Anton whispered, are you feeling ill? No, Anton, just old. I am not as spry as I used to be. Anton made no mention of the fact that she called him by his name instead of my Kinder. Usually that meant she was feeling serious, or that he was in trouble for not doing his chores. But tonight he knew it was because danger was near. Anton looked to the west, where the sky still flashed with flickering light. Surely it was too bright to have come only from exploding artillery shells. The Germans must have lit fires to burn nearby villages and farms. And now the destruction was creeping ever closer. Anton pictured a tiger stalking them through the fields and forest. He imagined it might pop out and devour them at any moment. They could do nothing but wait, and they did so in silence. According to Bubby, Uncle Dmitri and Uncle Pavel would meet them here and lead them to a shelter they had found near the village of Verbata. Anton hoped they would arrive soon. Verbata was a friendly village, full of Jews and Gentiles who knew each other well, and the thought of it made Anton feel safe. A flash of light to the west drew his eye. This one was close, too close, and it was not accompanied by an explosive blast. Instead, an engine revved, cutting through the quiet night. Anton, hide quickly, Bubby urged. They are here. The Germans are here. And that's chapter 1, peeps. So, right now, I want you to think of a chapter title you would give this chapter. But when you go onto Google Classroom and you type out your chapter title for chapter 1, don't just tell me the chapter title. I want you to tell me why you picked that chapter title. Okay? So, I'm anxious and excited to hear what you have to say. And stay in tune because tomorrow you will be hearing chapters 2 and 3. All right, peeps. See you tomorrow or tomorrow morning if you tune into my morning meeting. Bye.